probably worn a skirt or dress to school a total of 4 times, and each time I've been told that my dress is too short to cover up. If I sit down in my dress and it rides up to more than 4 inches above my knee, it's a distraction to the boys. We become sirens, luring them away from their school books, becoming an obstacle to their success. With our needs in view, we are decisively leading them into a crash. So I wouldn't want to be a distraction, would I? And so to make it easier for the boys to focus and to avoid receiving a detention for dress code violation in the middle of class, I forfeited dresses as an option for school attire. I compromised to make life a little bit easier for everyone else. Even though wearing tilted pants instead of my tennis skirt isn't really a pressing issue, I see this situation happen way too often. I see women having to make compromises for those around them way too often. Even aside from this universal standard of looking like a respectable woman, having to dress to cover ourselves up, I've noticed a prominent pattern of women in society being reduced into this position of a sort of one-sided compromise. And this happens to every woman. It's happened to your mothers, your sisters, your aunts. It's happened to me in the past, and honestly, I don't see this trend ending in my future. As a woman living in a man's world, we have a different set of expectations, and as a woman living in a man's world, we have to jump through many, many hoops to reach these expectations. As a woman living in a man's world, here's what my life has looked and will look like. Growing up as a Chinese American girl, I've seen that many Chinese women become housewives after marriage, sacrificing their careers to raise children, cook, clean, worship their sons. During lunches with relatives, I sit through my meal as I hear jokes about my short temper or lack of culinary mastery driving away potential husbands. And I just sit there and I mask my discomfort with a smile. When I practiced Kung Fu, I thought I was pretty good, but when someone at school told me to throw a punch, they'd tell me I was pretty strong. For a girl. I refrained from throwing a second punch, this time with all my power. During conversations with those who are my age, I hear disparaging profanity nonchalantly thrown around to address women. It seems so natural for them to call their mothers, their sisters, their friends, any woman, a bitch. I chew on the inside of my cheek, debating if I should say something, and I don't. It's tiring. I constantly am biting my tongue before I speak, so when the words come out, they're easy on the ears. At this point, I've stopped trying. I wear clothes that hopefully won't get me catcalled. I smile and nod my head when I'm being trivialized by a man. I don't speak up. More compromises. I always say to myself, it'll be fine because when I go to college, I'll have a fresh start. I'll be able to stand my ground. But as a prospective STEM major, I'd be in a male-dominated field where my femininity, it would be a weakness. And if I do try to act more masculine, whatever that means, I'd be labeled as a try-hard or as, again, the man synonym for a woman, a bitch. So instead, I would stay silent during class, not participate during discussions. And in the very few instances when I do have something to ask, I know I will begin my question with the word sorry, like my question would be an inconvenience. When I graduate college, I'll be off to make my 81 cents to a man's dollar, and I wouldn't be complaining because that's what's expected of a woman. But what's really expected of a woman anyway? We're supposed to be nurturing, and yet we're told not to be too emotional. We're supposed to be Virgin Marys, and yet we're all called sluts. We're expected to sacrifice our bodies and our lives to raise up the next generation of powerful people who'd go on to change the world. But when we try to assume this role for ourselves, we're suddenly much less of a woman. And I know that being a woman and being powerful shouldn't be mutually exclusive, but how am I supposed to know that when I've spent my entire life watching women give up one for another? Motherhood or vocation? I see myself in my late 20s, early 30s, with my family concerned that I don't have a ring on my finger or children coming out of me yet. I'll tell them I'm focusing on my career, and I'll be told by everyone down my family tree that I need a man to keep me grounded. And if and when I do decide to get married, have children, I'd have to make the choice to either become a stay-at-home mom or leave my children at daycares while I work. And God knows if I do that, I'd be labeled as a workaholic or a negligent mother, as many working mothers before me have been labeled. In this glimpse of my life that I just laid out, I'm faced with countless situations where I make compromises. Women often have to go out of their way and change their behavior or plans to make men and everyone else around them more comfortable. Because in a man's world, women are villainized for wielding authority, a power inherent within them, within all of us. Whereas men can weaponize this power and still be applauded. How are women supposed to speak up for themselves, to live in this society where we supposedly have equal opportunities when we've been conditioned not to speak up, to not pursue certain opportunities? How can we break this barrier when the ones in charge are the same ones who want us to fail? Prominent film producers, businessmen, congressmen, even our last president. Because for generations, women have been taught to shrink themselves. I grew up being taught to be ladylike by almost every woman who ever passed me by in life except for my mother. They told me to be polite, to not talk back, to smile. Thankfully, my mother taught me to be loud and to speak up. But almost every woman I know exhibits this repressed, ladylike demeanor, and they suggest, no, they caution that I do too. However, I see young boys in my family being raised to be headstrong and to confidently speak their minds. Men are brought up to be stoic and self-serving people, but women are raised to be empathetic, nurturing, selfless. And while men are being taught to be aggressive, assertive, unyielding, generations of women have been taught anything but. We were taught to clean, cook, knit, look pretty, and serve a sweet dish of submission to men. And because of how differently we were raised, society listens to men as a default, leaving little room for women to be acknowledged. And if we do want to be heard, we have to fight and fight hard. Women fight so hard to the point where we don't want to fight anymore, and we just comply with this norm. We hide how uncomfortable and immobilized we feel with a feminine smile, and we suffocate from our unsaid words. And this is exactly the problem. Women have been conditioned to shrink themselves to fit into the space in society allowed to us by men. We've been scraping the barrel for generations, and that needs to stop. Because as long as women keep shrinking as men expand, young girls will always feel the need to satisfy everyone else except for themselves. We need to stop passing down this broken model of a woman to our daughters, our sisters, our nieces. If we don't stop teaching our girls this accept what you have mentality, we'll grow up to smile when someone catcalls us from across the street. We won't talk back when we're being disrespected by men in our workplace. And we'll be polite when someone feels the need to comment on what seems like every single thing we're doing. Instead of teaching young girls what generations of women before us have been taught, we need to remind them that they don't have to hold their tongues. We need to tell our daughters that they can unapologetically speak their minds, as anyone should. We need to show them that they are entitled to everything a man is entitled to, that a man can't automatically claim what a woman doesn't fight for to take. Now, whether this is something as small as wearing whatever length skirt you want, covering as much or as little skin as you want, or as big as pursuing a career in Congress, becoming a software developer, walking on the moon, we as women are changing the landscape in which society views us. We are challenging this idea that women are submissive and malleable beings. We are escaping this one-sided compromise that we've been cornered into for generations. And we as women will move forward, no longer shrinking ourselves for the benefit of those around us.